Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in. My name is Ben Thomas, president of UST Training. We do online ABC operator training, and this is part of our ongoing webinar series to keep folks connected with various technologies, services, and compliance strategies for underground storage tank systems. And today I'm very excited to have OMNTEC represented, OMNTEC Vaporless Compliance Solutions, balancing compliance operations and being a good steward. We're going to have Kurt Gibson today introduce himself and talk about some of the technologies that are out there. OMNTEC, admittedly is not a big player in the world of, like, say, automatic tank gauges, but I think they've got a really cool technology. And I always love showcasing all the different companies that are out there. I think OMNTEC has some real cool innovations I'd like to share. And I think with that, Kurt, I'm just going to have you jump in and introduce yourself. But thanks for joining us today.
Sure will. Thank you very much, Ben. Good morning, everybody. I guess you folks on the West Coast are probably in your second cup of coffee. You Midwest folks, looks like we're probably catching you right before lunch, so we'll get you out before lunch. And then the rest of the East Coast folks, you should be back from lunch unless you're having that 3 martini lunch that some of us are famous for. But welcome, everybody. I wanted to thank Ben for this opportunity and Tank Savvy, the opportunity to discuss compliance, the role that an ATG plays, and there's options in the industry that you might have that you haven't considered in the past. Obviously, there's a couple reasons why we buy an ATG. One is to increase operations efficiency. The second, obviously, is for compliance. And I would say compliance is probably the main reason. We got to make sure that we're taking care of the regulators and our environment. And that kind of rolls into being a good steward of our environment, and then being a good steward of our budgets that are in place.
Able to advance your slide?
It's not going. There we go.
There we go.
All right, just a little bit about me, guys. I'm the national sales manager for OMNTEC Vaporless. I joined OMNTEC in about 2010. Prior to that, I was with another company that did oil and gas projects, a little bit different market than the PEI market. It was more the API market, more of the bulk fuels, big petroleum fuels, pipelines, anything from the oil patches to the pipeline to the big bulk tanks. So I've been in the industry for about 25 years. If you were on earlier, we were talking about I actually operate out of North Georgia. I've been here for quite some time, and I'm actually a proud Air Force veteran. I was in the Air Force for quite a few years, and after I got out of the Air Force, I went into this industry. A little bit about OMNTEC. OMNTEC itself is headquartered in Ronkonkoma, New York. That's out on Long Island. If anybody's familiar with the island, it's almost dead center of the island. We've been in business for over 40 years. I know it's not a well-known name, but we've been around a long time, have thousands of systems installed worldwide, and have been designing and manufacturing and supporting these systems for that long. So we've got a lot of experience. We've almost been a member of PEI as long for 34 years. We actually have 3 factories, 2 of which are in the US. Obviously the one in Ronkonkoma, and then we also have the Vaporless factory in Prescott Valley, Arizona. We have a 3rd factory that's abroad that takes care of our out of the country business. About 3 years ago, we purchased Vaporless, which was a real big coup for us. Vaporless brings a handful of innovative technologies and some of the best mechanical line leak detectors on the market. You won't find a better product than that Vaporless LD 2000, and all of those are actually manufactured right in the Prescott Valley out there in Arizona. One thing you ought to be aware of, we had some of our best years during COVID, and one reason why we did not have any supply chain issues. Everything's manufactured in the US, so we were actually able to meet the demand and like I said, have some of our best years.
And I personally, I'm a big fan of Vaporless, having met Greg Young many, many, many years ago. But big shout out to Greg and to Gabe who's on the line here. Right, they're I mean, rarely will you meet a company that is so passionate about line pressure at UST sites. I think that passion has really carried through their business excellence over the years.
So we've got through some of the introductions and some of the preliminary data. Let's get down to some meat here. What we're going to be talking about is the NFPA 30 overfill regulations and what you see out there now and maybe some options that you haven't considered. And then the same for the 40 CFR 280.44, the line leak release detection monitoring. So those will be the two topics, and everything will be focused around these two. So what we'll start off with is the NFPA 30 overfill regulations and how we would normally see it. Typically, the nucleus of those systems is an ATG. So again, we go back to meeting compliance. Why do we buy an ATG? The reason why we buy an ATG is to meet compliance and to make operations more efficient. What you're looking at right here are a handful of solutions that are actually OMNTEC solutions. Obviously, there's others out there. Veeder-Root has a solution. OPW has a solution. Incon or Franklin has a solution. But these are a couple of the solutions that we provide. You'll see, a very small one off to the left called the Proteus B. You'll see a stainless steel version that's actually made to go outdoors, which is NEMA 4X. And then our flagship product is pictured in the middle, which is our Proteus K. Out of the box, it's probably going to meet 99.9% of all of your operational and compliance needs. There's very few adders that you do have to add to it. There are a few, but very few. Typically, if you give me an order on Monday morning, I can have this shipped to you by Friday, and we can actually have this thing fully programmed so it's a plug and play situation. Where you guys might see TLS 350 applications, and which is no longer supported, you guys need to upgrade those. That console in the middle is what we would provide as a replacement for those TLS 350 applications.
Are they compatible with sensors and probes? If they were just to remove the box and put in the Proteus, would work?
They are not, and that's pretty standard across the industry. Veeder-Root will talk to our box and vice versa. And it's a compliance. You have to go get third-party approvals, and they're not approved to work.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that makes
So
sense.
that would be the reasons. But having said that and brought that up, the price point, and again, going back to being a good steward, I can give you that console, new probes and new sensors for the price point, if not less than a Veeder-Root console upgrade.
Okay.
So there are unique advantages to going this OMNTEC route. At that point, you got a complete new system, full warranty across the board. You should have a system that's going to last you quite a long time. All right, so let's get into the NFPA 30, I guess the requirements. They were updated a few years back, and you'll see two requirements here. One for deliveries greater than 25 gallons. They're both greater than 25 gallons. I'm sorry, I thought one was less than 25. Excuse me. So anyway, here are the requirements. So no later than October 13th, you got to start testing testing the spill buckets every 3 years. And then you got to start inspecting the overfill equipment every 3 years. And that's the update from what was old. Now, here are some requirements. The 2003 edition, you have to either be equipped with an overfill equipment or something that's going to automatically shut it off. And of course, we'll get into some of those pieces of equipment that will allow you to do that. So what you're going to see in the industry right now, I'm calling it a fuel limiter. Some people call it an overfill valve. That's a pretty common piece of equipment that you're going to see. The way that works, and I may not be telling you anything that you don't know, the driver starts making a drop, and as he drops into that tank, the product rises. As it rises, it lifts that lever and actually shuts off the flow of product into that tank. What is old and is no longer accepted is the ball valve in the middle. And that's an old piece of equipment. It's been around forever. It is grandfathered in. If you have that in your tank and it's still functional, it's still accepted. But once it's no longer functional, you do have to upgrade that.
My,
And your
my, my,
choice,
my, my joke, Kurt, with the ball float valve is it's the only overfill device that can act under certain conditions can cause an overfill.
well, I guess it met the need, or it was there for it was an attempt. I
Sure.
guess they
Yeah,
get a
yeah.
trophy for trying. The other accepted solution is a remote light and horn. So you may see any one of these three devices in your tanks for overfill protection. But bear in mind that the ball valve moving forward is no longer accepted. It's just been grandfathered in. If it's working, they'll accept it. But the minute that thing has to be replaced, it fails. You've got to go one of these two routes, an overfill valve or a remote light and horn. Now, I said or, it could be an and. Some places are requiring the overfill valve and a remote light and horn. Personally, that's my preference. It's kind of the belts and suspenders approach. If one fails or is defeated, you do have a backup. So I think when the regulators look at this, their primary focus is on compliance and to make sure that you are being that good steward of the environment and we're not actually putting product on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So overfill valve and remote light and horn are your two options for your overfill protection at the moment. We talked about this a little bit, which is better. There's pros and cons on each one, and we'll go over that in just a minute. But again, you do have the option of either one of these. And again, my preference is to go ahead and have both of them.
Unless you're in Wisconsin. Wisconsin does require belts and suspenders by rule, which is kind of cool.
Okay. So we'll go over the good stuff first. The pros of the overfill valve, in my opinion, obviously it meets the compliance and it shuts off automatically during a fill. To me, the cons somewhat outweigh the pros, but everybody has to be the judge of that themselves. The initial cost of the overfill valve is not inexpensive. You are required to test this. There's additional cost for that testing. Often these valves are destroyed during the testing. Obviously, if they're destroyed, you got to replace them, so you have additional cost. And then what I'm also hearing from the field quite often is drivers will defeat this thing by knocking that piece out of the overfill valve. So at the end of the day, you may end up with no overfill protection and no way of knowing when you've hit that high limit, thus resulting in an overfill. So going back to the belts and suspenders, that's one of the reasons why probably Wisconsin says, you know what, we're going to fix that. We require both.
I also want to throw in, I mean, the rules specifically, I mean, in common terms, it's if the delivery driver disables the device and causes an overfill, it's their delivery, but it's the operator's spill. So, I mean, if the drivers are doing things to damage your overfill equipment, that's bad because the operator is ultimately on the hook. So if you think you see an operator tinkering with the overfill device, you want to stop them right away.
All right, well, let's talk about the remote lights and horns. Again, it's going to meet your compliance, guys. It's going to supply you that visual and that audible. So it's connected to your ATG. Your ATG is set up to give an alarm at 85, 90%. When that contact closes, it goes out to this remote light and horn, gives them the horn and gives them the light. It's less capital costs involved in the install, the testing, just moving forward. So I consider that a pro. And then obviously less ongoing maintenance in comparison to what you're seeing in that overfill valve. In this particular application, in this configuration, you got a two-box solution. So that's a bit of a drawback. You have a common alarm, so you really don't know which tank is going into alarm. There's really no verification that it's operating correctly, and it does not rearm. And when I say it does not rearm, what happens in this configuration is there's a contact that closes. When that contact closes, that's it, it's closed. So if you are doing a tandem drop or a dual drop, that second tank goes into alarm, you're never going to see it. So at that point, you are at risk of an overfill because the operator really has no idea what's going on and at what level he is at in the tank. Because of this, and because we are who we are and what we do, we've got remote light solutions. We were working with the California Water Board, and we were presenting this to them, and they looked at our solution and they looked at this standard solution that you see on the screen. And recognizing that all salespeople, you can tell when all salespeople are lying, their lips are moving, they said, well, let us do a little legwork. So they did some legwork, and this is what they came back with. This is part of that letter that was sent out and incorporated as part of their regulations. They basically are saying here that this configurations like this, most of the big box solutions, that just what I said, you get a single light, you get a single closure, and because of that, you are at risk of having an overfill if you were depending solely on a remote light and horn. So in applications like that, they fail that. Your only option is one of two things: to add a secondary, which would be an overfill valve, or to replace this unit with something that will give you a light for each tank and that will rearm. So you have both of those options. We're all familiar with the overfill valves. Those are pretty standard. What you might not be familiar with is we have an OMNTEC solution, which is called a Delivery Defender Lite. And just by looking at it, you can see there is an indicator for each one of the tanks. There's a system normal light. There's also, we add the fuel type that's supposed to be going into each tank. So hopefully that's going to avert some cross-contamination. But what this also does is it rearms. You are going to get alarms on each one of the tanks as those tanks are being filled. The beauty of this is obviously it's going to connect to our Proteus ATG, but it's also a universal device. We're just speaking the industry standard protocols. So I can connect this. I can put lipstick on that pig, and I can connect this to a Veeder-Root, I can connect it to an Incon, I can connect it to an OPW, and we've done that successfully. We're just using that industry standard protocol to communicate. So it is a live device that's constantly talking to that ATG. The minute you get a high level, you're going to get an alarm. If there's a loss of communications to that ATG, you're going to get an alarm. So that driver will always have an indication or some idea of what's going on in those tanks.
I do have a question for our attendees today, and please use the Q&A feature to answer. I kind of think of single tank deliveries as common. I might be being naive. Haven't been out in the field in a little bit. I mean, is it common for folks on the line to get dual tank deliveries simultaneously? I mean, if it does, and this would seem like a kind of a smart solution, but it is. So I'll ask my attendees online today: are dual tank deliveries, two tanks getting filled at the same time, a common thing? Please answer on Q&A if you can. Just help me kind of understand the scope of the group here today. This is interesting stuff, Kurt. I appreciate you sharing it.
Something that I kind of left out, and I'll just make sure everybody's aware. The beauty of it is you're going to get all this functionality, the universal functionality, and the price point on this is the same as that two-box configuration that I showed you earlier. So it's not like it's out of the budget or anything. You're just going to get additional functionality with this device that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Okay, thank you.
So what I've got here is I'm going to run a little video. It's a short 1 minute, but it'll actually show this device in operation.
And turn up your volume a little bit too, Kurt.
That is the tank overfill warning system, presented by a sunlight visible LED and audibly by a 90 decibel alarm that provides the driver with clear indication of delivery progress to minimize overfill and cross-contamination risk. The green system normal LED is illuminated, confirming the communication link to the ATG console is working properly. Next, the driver tests the DDL before he begins unloading product. To perform a test of the DDL, press and hold the acknowledge button for 5 seconds. If a tank reaches high level, the flashing tank LED turns solid and the alarm sounds. If unloading continues into the same tank, the DDL will audibly re-alarm. The driver opens the valves to the diesel compartment and the DDL responds by activating the delivery in progress and diesel tank LEDs, verifying that a delivery into the proper tank has begun. At this point, the driver begins dropping fuel into both regular unleaded tanks, and the DDL updates the current status to a delivery in progress for both tanks. If you would like more information, reach out to us by phone or visit us on the web.
So it's actually a pretty slick device. So I would ask you guys to take this in consideration as you're doing any of your upgrades or maybe some of your new systems.
Is an intelligent.
All right, that kind of wraps up the overfill portion of this. We're going to get into a little bit of line leak. And this is meeting your 40 CFR 280.44 requirements. So the law actually just calls for ALLD. You may know it as PLLD or ELLD or MLLD, but the law actually calls it's automatic line leak detection. It requires a couple of things, or one of two things. Either it requires to stop the flow or to slow the flow. It requires a 3 gallon per hour, 10 PSI line pressure within 1 hour. So you need to be able to test to that. And then they also require an annual test for either one of these systems. Now, the two most common methods you'll see out there are MLLD, which is what you'll see on the right, a mechanical line leak detector. These are actually installed right on top of the submersible pump. And then the system on the right represents what we would call maybe ELLD. You can see, obviously, the system on the left, very basic, very easy to install. It's not complex. The system on the right could be the opposite of all three of those. So let's talk about some pros and cons of the ALLD. Obviously, it's going to meet your compliance. It's going to provide catastrophic and precision testing potentially. Via the console, it could supply a positive shutdown. And via the console, you're going to get notification. And obviously, it's going to record actions in history. The cons, as I see them, is they're expensive. They're very complex. There's the potential you're going to lose revenue due to false alarms. Reset often requires a service call. Exhausts already stretched thin qualified technician resources. And positive shutdown. Now you'll notice I had positive shutdown in both the pros and cons. You'll kind of have to weigh that, how, if you think it's a pro or it's con. It can be both. It can be both. Now, the con of qualified technicians, last year at the PEI Managers Conference, there were two things that came out of that conference that were just glaring. One is the EV stuff, we're not ready for it. It's years out. But the one that really got the most chatter was the lack of qualified technicians. Everyone I speak to, they don't have enough technicians, and they are literally scrambling, searching high and low to get qualified technicians. So that's one reason why I put it in there. If there's anything that we can do that we can reduce that burden for a qualified technician to show up on site, make it easier for operations or the end user help relieve that burden. I think everyone should be looking at that and making an effort to relieve that burden.
Kurt, I want to put in a plug for PEI, Petroleum Equipment Institute. Tom, the president of OMNTEC, and myself are on the PEI board, and PEI is going to be unveiling soon some certification initiatives. We're trying to kind of develop standards to try to help get more certified technicians out there. And there's also some workforce efforts afoot to try to get more people into the industry. So PEI is taking a pretty proactive role in trying to have that, because having stretch thin service technicians is a hardship on everyone. So there's some cool efforts afoot to try to make that less, remove that off your con list, because I agree that potentially a major problem.
Fantastic. Good news. On the mechanical side, it's going to meet compliance. It's somewhat inexpensive, particularly in comparison to your ELLD type. It will provide catastrophic testing. It can do the other testing as well. If it's a double wide pipe or double wall pipe, we can throw a sensor in and bring that in. It employs solid mechanical operating principles. I mean, you can just look at it. There's very little to go wrong in these devices. It's not an inferred measurement like I would think an ELLD system would be. There's something going on out there. It comes into a piece of software and it does something and you're not quite sure, but it might be shutting you down. So when it shuts you down, you might be scratching body parts, wondering why. And there comes in, you got to have a technician come out and actually take a look at it. So you don't have those problems here. Again, a pro here, there is no positive shutdown. There's a slow flow, but there is no positive shutdown. And with this particular vise, the LD2000, it has that extra check valve in it. It's a little device on the end. So in addition to the check valve in your submersible, you got a check valve here, which is going to maintain a higher pressure in your lines. And probably 99.9% of the time, if you have any slow flow issues, this will address those slow flow issues and actually rid the system of it. The obvious cons to me is there's really no remote notification with just a mechanical line leak detector, and there's no positive shutdown. Again, I've got positive shutdown in the pros and the cons. You'll have to weigh that again and decide whether or not it's a pro or a con.
Kurt, I thought there was a vaporless mechanical leak detector that had positive pump shutdown. Am I not remembering that right?
Yeah, we're gonna hit that next.
Oh, sorry.
You're good.
Don't want to steal your thunder.
No, it's a good lead in. So we've given that a lot of thought, and as a result, you'll see the same mechanical line leak detector here with a sensor on top of it. And so with that sensor, that's going to come back to our Proteus ATG. So we feel like we're marrying the two versions of line leak detection into one, the best of both. We've got the reliable, simple mechanical line leak detectors. We've got a sensor on it. That sensor is going to tell us whether we're in slow flow, whether we're in leak. That's going to go back to the ATG. The ATG at that point will interface to your motor starters, potentially do motor or pump shutdown at that point, or positive shutdown. And then all that data, goes into the ATG for storage. It'll send you emails, text messages, notify, alarm. So everything that you've been looking for in electronic line leak, we're doing in a different configuration. So again, this goes back to what I mentioned before. There are options that you have out there. Everybody thinks there's only one way to do it, and that's just what they put in. I'm hoping what you're seeing in this presentation kind of opens your eyes a little bit, that there are options to the way things used to be. And that's just due to new technology, new design, new development. And these really should be things that you guys would consider. The price points on these are considerably less. So again, good stewardship. We're meeting our compliance. We're making the regulators happy. We're keeping stuff off the ground, and we're meeting those budgetary constraints that everybody is seeing. Past couple of years with high inflation has hurt everybody. So we're doing our part to try to ease that pain a little bit, meet compliance, increase your operation efficiency at the same time. This particular sensor, though, will also attach to our sensor bus. So you're not running additional wire out there. This goes on our sensor bus. So if you've got an interstice sensor, a sump sensor, a dispenser pan sensor, we're using that same bus to bring that into the ATG. So there again, that will also decrease that installation cost.
I really like this feature. I'm not a big fan of slow flow. I mean, I've talked to thousands of operators over the years, and if you're coming into the business, no one ever told them that slow flow means a suspected release, right? So we try to really cover that hard in our Class ABC operator training. But I think, and if I'm not mistaken, you're the only manufacturer of mechanical leak detectors that has positive pump shutdown. Is that correct, Kurt?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
That is
So
correct.
I just think that's a really cool innovation.
And we're really addressing slow flow here in two ways with that check valve. That check valve is allowing us to keep our line pressures up around 22, 23, 24. Everybody else is operating down in the low teens. So anytime you decrease that span, you're more apt to have issues. So we've increased that span with that check valve.
Okay.
And then we're also monitoring the position with that sensor. With that sensor, if it indicates it's in slow valve, we can hit the pumps and get rid of that vapor that way. So we're kind of belts and suspenders on that type of application of slow flow.
So you're less prone to false alarms, isn't that right?
That is correct.
Okay, interesting.
That
Okay,
is
cool.
correct.
Cool.
I won't put my paycheck on it, but I just about guarantee we'll get rid of your slow flow issues with this configuration. All right, so now that we've got mechanical line leak detectors in, there's a requirement to test it. The two most common testers out there, you'll see the vaporless LDT 890, and you'll see the Esterbrook Easy Check. I mean, by looking at them, there's no way in the world you'll get these two confused. The vaporless, Greg, who Ben mentioned earlier, spent a lot of time looking into this, fully developing this box. I can't say the same for the other, but there's a lot that went into this, and hands down, obviously, I'm biased. That vaporless LDT 890 is the best tester out there on the market. We'll take a look at a few of the pros and cons of these. The LDT 890, that's going to give you a true 3-gallon test at 10 PSI. It compensates for any changes in pressure, viscosity, temperature. It'll work with any MLLD leak detector that I'm aware of. It follows the PEI 1200 testing procedures. It meets 40 CFR 280.40. And it's a little bit more expensive. That would be the con. And what I really like about this is you're not going through the shear valve. If you think about that shear valve, it's a pressed piece metal, and you can see the seam in it. And there's a compression fitting there. So everybody pulls that compression fitting out to test through. Well, if you think about it, a compression fitting is made to go in one time, and that's it. So you are really opening yourself up to failure by taking that compression fitting out, putting a new one, putting it in, taking it out, putting it in, taking it out, putting it in. Eventually, it's going to fail, and you're going to have a situation that you really don't want. We don't test through that. So with the LDT 890, and you'll see this little black device, we recommend you remove the filter and you test from that position. When you test from that position, obviously you're not down on your knees, you're not finding the shear valve, you're not at risk of breaking that shear valve and causing the mess, and you're getting a truer test because you're at a higher point. compare that to others, this is just the better way to do it.
I probably want to point out because maybe some folks here on the line are kind of new to underground storage tank compliance. I believe this is the only leak simulation test on a underground storage tank system, and in particular the piping, because what's happening here is that we're actually inducing a leak in the system with the pump on, dumping the fuel into our little containment vessel you see on the picture there, and then trying to determine if the mechanical line leak detector will in fact find a 3 gallon per hour leak. So you induce a 3 gallon per hour leak, and if it trips and it gets slow flow, the thing is working. So I've always found this to be kind of a particularly, I don't know, it's a cool test because you're literally trying to induce a leak and seeing if the leak detector device finds it. So, and yeah, it's a good device.
Yeah, it's hands down better than our competitive product. There's a real chance you are not going to see a leak with the other product. You're not going to miss those leaks here. So when you're actually out there doing a test with the LDT 890, you're actually doing a true test, where I can't say that with the other device. Just giving us freezing up a minute, guys.
We'll be saving questions for the end, but if you do have questions, feel free to type them up on the Q&A box, and we'll tackle those near the end of today's webinar.
Okay. The alternate device, it is inexpensive. The 890 is a little bit more expensive. So I mean, I would position that as maybe a pro. The cons: does not compensate for the variables, tends to supply inconsistent results, can give a false security or a false sense of security. And again, like I said, typically you're going to test through the shear valve with these devices, and I don't recommend that at all. There was one thing that I didn't include here, and we've got maybe just a minute. We also have a line leak detection device that was designed specifically for the backup generator applications. In years past, you really couldn't put a mechanical in. The mechanical would put you into slow flow. You didn't want to put your backup generator into slow flow. You didn't want to use positive shutdown because you got a backup generator. It's a situation where you need power, so you don't want to do positive shutdown. So for years and years and years, these applications were always given a variance because of the application. Well, some years back, and Ben, you might be able to help me out here, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, that changed. There was a new regulation that came out that says, hey, if you've got underground lines, you've got to do testing. As most regulations go, I think regulators were a little slow to start to enforce that. COVID hit, that slowed things down even more. And what I am seeing now, regulators are starting to take a look at that a little closer and starting to enforce it. Some regulators are just still giving the variance because I think they don't know that there's a solution that will give a good test, not put it into slow flow, and not put it into positive shutdown. We call ours the PLC 5000. So the PLC 5000 operates a little bit different than, say, your retail application for ELLD. Your retail application for ELLD, you have a requirement for power at test, and when it tests and it says if you fail, you go positive shutdown. Now, if it's a backup generator situation, your mom's on the table, you don't want positive shutdown, you want fuel. The way we operate is we test constantly. So you're going to know 6 weeks out, 6 months out, a year out, whatever it is, before you have a requirement for that power. So the odds of you having a leak in that moment that we didn't test for whatever reason and it fell and cut you off are probably slim to none. Now, as a backup, we've got 3 operating modes. I can do positive shutdown. I can do nothing and just send an email or a text message, or I can do positive shutdown. You go down and you go, yeah, I got a little leak right here. I'll put down a couple of pads and you put it into bypass. So we think That's a gem of the system, and it fits in between what the mechanical line leak detector didn't do right and what your typical ELLD didn't do. We kind of, again, took those two, put it into one, and brought in the best of everything to actually meet the specific needs for those backup generators.
And Kurt, does OMTEC slash Vaporless also have a big flow solution for truck stops? If I remember, you guys have a leak detector that's for high capacity flow.
We do. It's called the LD 3000. I did not include that in this presentation,
Okay.
but I think we're one of the few that has that, and that's one of those things that you go in and you see them going out the door, and you don't know where they're going, but they're just going. So they're a great device, and I think we're the only one out there that really has that solution.
So if you're on the line today and you've got a super high throughput site, you might need a leak detector that can kind of keep up with your output. So pardon me, it's again another good example of how I think OMTEC Vaporless has kind of tried to come up with creative solutions for unique applications over the years.
And at the end of the day, guys, what I hope you glean for this is you've got some options that maybe you just weren't aware of. Maybe we could be doing a better marketing job, but take down my name, my email, my phone number, and if there's anything I can do for you guys, if there's anything I can do to support you, it would be an honor to become a trusted resource for you. I might even get my feelings hurt if I don't hear from you. So please take down my contact information, and if there's any follow-up I can do, don't hesitate to ask.
And then, Kurt, there's a number of petroleum marketer trade shows coming up this year. Which ones will you or OMTEC be at?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. Most all the regionals we're going to. Most all the regionals we've been to. Obviously, the PEI NACS we're going to. Eastern Energy, I believe, is next week, so we will be there. I know for a fact. I'd have to take a look at the calendar to see what else we have on our calendar. I think there's one coming up in Texas, June the 9th, 10th, 11th, that we will be at as well.
If you are going to the PEI NACS show in Chicago this October, Kurt will be there. I'll be there at my booth. I'll be at the National Tanks Conference in Spokane, Washington in September. And so if you want to stop by and say hi there, would nice to meet you there. Any questions for Kurt as we kind of wrap things up here?
Ben, I lost my Q&A, so if there are questions, you may have to relay them for me.
Sure. Yeah. Ed says we're working with OMTEC on some generator piping leak detection solutions. They've been very supportive. Question on certification: is OMTEC technician certification completely online and self-paced now? And are there no more live webinar certification seminars?
As a standard, they are all are online. But if there's a need to do something, if we need to pull something together, you got other questions or need some more support, we'll be happy to do something special for you.
Okay, great. And I did have a question for Gabe. Was that your voice on the video that we saw on YouTube a little bit ago? The voice sounded awful familiar. I wasn't sure if that was Gabe out of Prescott Valley or not.
I don't think that. I think that was an automated voice.
Oh, sorry, Gabe.
It may have been AI.
It's kind of sounded like Gabe. That's funny.
Yeah.
I think. Any more questions for Kurt or for myself? That's fine. They haven't used me for voiceovers yet. I do find it interesting. I would 1958, the submersible turbine pump begins production in the United States. Gas stations go from suction systems now to pressurized piping systems. The first mechanical leak detector came on the market in 1961. So it was only 3 years after production where suddenly operators were losing a lot of fuel. There's a really interesting history to the mechanical line leak detector, and it's really cool to see how it's gone from the early prototype red jacket models to try to keep your inventory contained to these full-blown much more sophisticated systems now that can key into your tank monitor and manage so much more. So it's really cool to see the evolution of this, what is now kind of old technology. I do find it interesting. The mechanical leak detector was invented, 27 years before it was required by law. So it's got an interesting lineage there.
Well, it's been a mainstay in the market, and it's been tried and proven. I mean, obviously, there's been tweaks, and one of the tweaks that we made to it was that check valve.
Sure.
The construction of the body is way above any of the standards that you're going to see with the other two providers. And again, like I said, all of ours are made actually in Prescott Valley, so we've never had any issues with tariffs, increase with prices, or stock. So if you need them, we got them, and we're responsive.
Kurt, appreciate that. That was really interesting. Always something new to learn in the industry. So, special thanks to Kurt and OMNTEC and Vaporless for putting together a great presentation. I'm gonna please stop by. I'll be doing this monthly webinar series throughout the year. Got special guest speakers coming up about once a month, and go to our webpage usttraining.com to sign up. I've got ads on LinkedIn as well, and if you ever have questions about A, B, or C UST online operator training, please give me a shout.